Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
On the eve of a House of Lords vote that could derail the government's tax credit cuts, Labour has promised not to make any political capital out of a U-turn if the Chancellor delays the measures. The Education Secretary, Nicky Morgan, insisted the main policy wasn't changing, but left the door open to tweaks, admitting George Osborne is in listening mode. Fatima Manji reports.
More than 3 million households in Britain will receive a letter just before Christmas bearing bad news, telling them how much worse off they'll be once the tax credit changes come into place next April. Despite the growing political discontent and suggestions George Osborne may be open to compromise, it seems the government isn't backing down on the policy itself.
The policy is not going to change. It has to be right, as I say, for people to keep more of the money that they earn. And it's an overall package. Okay. You can't lift income tax thresholds without and introduce the national living wage without also taking difficult decisions like the one we are taking on tax credits.
Now the Shadow Chancellor has declared he will support George Osborne in a turnaround, saying it's no time for political stunts.
What I've said to George Osborne is I think he should do a U-turn on this one, and I know what U-turns cost politicians, but if he does a U-turn in full to protect people on the tax credit system, I will not make any political hay out of this. In fact, I'll support the government.
What are you entitled to?
The cut to tax credits is part of the government's plan to make work pay for families in a high-wage, low-welfare economy. Under the current system, it's argued there's less incentive for people to work more than 16 hours a week because they'd lose out on tax credits. But research from the House of Commons Library suggests the changes will mean the average family affected will be worse off by £1,300 a year. Lone parents will be among those hit the hardest. A charity that supports struggling families estimates a single parent with one child, working 16 hours a week, earning £8,500 a year, will lose £26 a week. A single parent with 2 children at high school, working 2 jobs totalling 16.5 hours a week, will lose £18 per week. The House of Commons has passed the cuts to tax credits, but not without signs of protest from the government's own backbenchers.
As these proposals stand, too many people will be adversely affected.
And now the government is potentially facing defeat in the House of Lords, with several motions tomorrow either trying to block the plans entirely or delay them. Traditionally, the House of Lords doesn't oppose bills involving finance, and the House of Commons has supremacy on those issues. So this is somewhat of a radical move.
And what you've got here now, I think, is a critical mass where it's actually taking parliamentary form. We saw it in the Commons last week, and tomorrow it's going to hit the Lords. And it's a presentational problem, a political problem, but actually it's also a material problem because...
Is it a constitutional problem?
Well, it could become a constitutional problem because the Lords is not meant to oppose the Commons except in very specific circumstances. And I suspect that we could end up with a real deadlock here. Perhaps the worst deadlock there's been since the NHS plan caused problems.
Because as I understand it, the Lords is not allowed to overrule the Commons on finance bill matters. And this is not a finance bill matter, it's a separate matter.
That's right.
They're all right with that.
There was a ruling last week that it is not a financial bill, so the Lords can go ahead and rebel.
And unsurprisingly, it's not gone down well with the government, with talk of this creating a constitutional crisis and even suggestions of revenge on the Lords to follow.
The government will say, well, the Commons have already passed this regulation. Yes, but they are saying themselves they didn't realise what it meant, and they are livid. I understand many Conservative backbenchers in the elected House are furious because they don't want the Tories to be the nasty party.
So within hours, the Lords could be set to derail the government's plans, meaning the debate itself could get nastier still, though the Chancellor may yet find a way of softening the blow of tax credit cuts.
Fatima Manji reporting, and joining me now from Oxfordshire is the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Lord Heseltine. Lord Heseltine, what should the Lords be worried about tomorrow? Breaching 4 centuries of parliamentary convention or speaking up for some of the poorest people in society?
There is a very clear convention that you can only really have one Chancellor of the Exchequer. The House of Commons have taken decisions, I think, on 2 occasions about these, yes, controversial measures. And there's a very clear convention that the House of Lords, the unelected House of Lords, does not defy the will of the Commons on finance matters. And you say it'll get bitter and people will get ill-tempered. I hope not, because that doesn't add to the quality of the argument or to the nature of the issue. This is a constitutional issue, and the government are entitled to expect to prevail. But that is the view of the House of Commons.
For 3 million families, this is an issue about losing £1,200 a year, money they can ill afford to lose. And the former Business Secretary Vince Cable said today, this is a good issue for the Lords to step forward and look relevant to the people of Britain. He's right, isn't he?
You don't know who's going to win or who's going to lose money as a result of this. Every time a Chancellor produces a controversial measure, people produce all sorts of figures, but no one actually knows what's going to happen. They don't know the impact on the living wage. They don't know the impact on increased wages, which are now rising faster than they have for years. They don't know about people who change their jobs or work longer hours.
Yes, but
so nobody knows about these figures, but there is always in the Liberal or the Labour Party those who clutch on to calculations as though they're facts.
Lord Heseltine, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're not just talking about those in the Liberal Democrat Party and the Labour Party. You're talking about many respected think tanks, and you were talking about what seems to be an increasing number of Tory MPs.
Of course, these are controversial issues, but you have to weigh it against the state of the national economy, where we are piling up debt every week, every day, which somebody, sooner or later, is going to have to pay back.
But is it right that those at the very bottom...
Sorry, can I just finish the sentence? What this government was elected to do was to stop penalising future generations by piling up debt. And that's what the House of Commons has decided to do.
But Lord Heseltine...
So, the issue is a very simple one.
But Lord Heseltine, this government was elected having promised that it would be a government for hard-working families. You are talking about 3 million families who go out to work, who will be hit hard. Are you saying that that is just the acceptable face of this policy, that that is just what has to happen?
No, I'm not saying anything of that sort. I'm merely saying that these figures must be treated with a certain scepticism. All forecasts of this sort around controversial policies are designed to stoke up the argument, whereas the reality could be very different. Now, let's just be realistic about this. George Osborne is a very sophisticated Chancellor who knows his trade, who's got this country into a very strong economic position, and he will watch carefully to see what happens. So that judgment is the one that will matter, not the position today of Mr. Corbyn saying, look, we don't care, because he believes actually in having taxes and having higher borrowing in a way that his own party don't even agree with.
Lord Heseltine, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but we'll have to end it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
There'll be no money if you dare to question work in the Tory way. The truth is up there carved in stone, where 21 dead now lay. Our family's lost for a few